She stepped off the Danfo bus with N500 in her pocket and a phone number that would destroy her life. The address in Aja led to an abandoned compound, rusty gates, and the laughter of security guards who'd seen this scam 100 times. No job, no madam, no mercy. Just Lagos swallowing another village girl whole. What happens when the city you came to save you becomes the place that buries you alive? Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they sold you a beautiful lie? Drop a comment if you've been betrayed like this. 23 years old, homeless in Africa's richest city, N500 between survival and death. But what if your lowest moment was actually destiny preparing you for something you couldn't yet comprehend? Adanna stood outside that locked gate in Aja, her torn bag at her feet, watching the security men mock her accent. The woman who'd promised her housemaid work, N20,000 monthly, food, accommodation, never existed. The phone number led nowhere. The address was a lie wrapped in hope. By nightfall, Adanna found herself under Lekki Ikoyi Bridge. The bridge overhead rumbled with convoys of wealth while she spread her torn wrapper on concrete that still held the day's heat. Lagos never stopped moving. It just stopped seeing people like her. At dawn, she joined other homeless people at the public borehole, bathing with soap she'd bought for N50. Her pride remained even when everything else was gone. She spent her first week begging for day labor, N200 to wash clothes, N150 to sweep compounds. Rich madams looked through her like glass. Back in her village, a boy named Emeka had wanted to marry her. She'd refused, wanting to build something for herself first. Now that choice felt foolish. Her body remained untouched by any man, a decision that felt both precious and pointless in a city that measured worth in survival. If you were scammed and left with nothing in a strange city, what would you do? Comment fight if you'd keep going, or home if you'd return to your village. On her 7th night under the bridge, as rain began to fall, Adanna made a decision. Tomorrow, she would beg outside the richest estate gates in Ikoyi. She had no idea that behind one of those gates, a billionaire was about to have the worst night of his life, and their collision would change everything. The richest man in Lagos collapsed on a sidewalk in the rain. And the only person who stopped to help owned nothing but a torn wrapper and a heart that hadn't learned to be cold. Chiwetel Okonkwo had built his fintech empire on precision, control, calculated risk. Tonight, precision shattered. He'd come home early from a business trip to surprise Zainab, his fiancée, his partner in everything, only to find her in his bed with Tunde, his business partner, the man he called brother. The betrayal tasted like metal, like blood. He'd driven blindly through Lagos, security details scrambling to follow, until his convoy stopped outside the Parkview estate. He couldn't go inside, couldn't face the empty mansion that suddenly felt like a monument to his stupidity. Rain hammered the pavement between Banana Island and hell, turning the street into a river that reflected security lights from mansions she'd never entered. Except tonight, one of those mansion owners sat beside her in the storm, crying like the world had ended. Adanna had been sheltering under a torn umbrella when the SUVs pulled up. She watched this man in expensive agbada stumble out, dismiss his security, and collapse on the wet sidewalk like wealth meant nothing. She approached slowly, offered her wrapper, the only thing between her skin and the rain. When she wrapped the cloth around his shoulders, her fingers brushed his neck. Warm despite the rain, trembling despite his wealth. He caught her wrist, not rough, but desperate, like a drowning man grabbing at air. "Why?" he demanded. "Why help me?" She didn't pull away. "Because you're hurt," she whispered. "Money can't fix that." "You think I'm stupid? Who sent you? How much are they paying you?" His accusation should have made her angry. Instead, she recognized the pain behind it, the kind that makes you distrust kindness, because betrayal taught you everyone wants something. "Nobody sent me, sir. I know what it feels like when everything falls apart." Something in her voice, truth maybe, or exhaustion that matched his own, made Chiwetel look at her properly, really see her. Muddy feet, torn clothes, eyes that held no calculation, no agenda, just human compassion offered freely. They sat in the rain for 3 hours. He talked, she listened. Dawn broke gold over Lagos, painting the skyline in colors that promised new beginnings. Have you ever helped a stranger when you had nothing to give? Or received kindness from the most unexpected person? Share your story below. I'm reading every comment. As sunrise turned the Lagos skyline gold, Chiwetel stood and made an offer that would sound insane to anyone who wasn't desperate. "Marry me! 1 year, and 50 million. I need a wife, and you need a life." Adanna stared at him, mud-covered and trembling, and realized Ayanmo wasn't gentle. It was violent, sudden, and utterly terrifying. She signed her name on documents she could barely read, trading 1 year of her life for money she couldn't comprehend. But the fine print included rules about her body that would later become the story's most dangerous secret. The law office smelled like leather and old money, air conditioning so cold, Adanna's teeth chattered. She sat across from a man whose watch cost more than her village's annual harvest, signing papers that made her, on paper, the wealthiest bride in Lagos. The lawyer, a thin man with glasses that reflected her confusion, explained each clause slowly. 1 year contract marriage, N50 million payment in installments, public appearances required, media cooperation mandatory, termination clauses if either party violated terms. The no intimacy clause appeared on page 7. Chiwetel's voice was flat when he explained, "This is strictly business. No physical relations. No romantic expectations. You'll have your own wing of the house. We maintain separate lives in private." Adanna nodded, though something in her chest tightened. Not disappointment. She barely knew this man. But the clinical coldness of turning marriage into a business transaction felt wrong somehow. The lawyer's assistant brought fresh clothes for Adanna. Designer labels, soft fabrics that felt alien against her work-roughened skin. When she emerged from the bathroom transformed, Chiwetel's eyes traveled her body slowly, clinical assessment shifting to something warmer. He cleared his throat. "The contract forbids physical relations. This is business." She nodded, ignoring the flutter in her stomach when his gaze lingered on her neck. "I understand, sir." "Mrs. Okonkwo, do you understand that this marriage, while legal, includes termination clauses?" the lawyer asked. "I understand everything except why a man this successful needs to buy a wife." Chiwetel's jaw tightened. "Because the woman I loved sold me for shares in my own company." The bitterness in his voice explained everything. This wasn't about her. This was revenge dressed in legal documents, a weapon aimed at the woman who'd betrayed him. Adanna was just the instrument. Would you sign a contract marriage with a stranger for N50 million? Be honest. Comment yes or no and tell me why. There's no wrong answer here." As they left the lawyer's office, Chiwetel's phone exploded with messages. Zainab had found out about the marriage license within hours. "She's declaring war," he muttered, scrolling through threats. Adanna touched his arm without thinking. "Then we fight together." The electricity between them lasted only a second, but it was enough to make them both wonder. What happens when a business arrangement starts feeling like something else? The 12-bedroom mansion in Banana Island didn't just intimidate her. It whispered that girls like her didn't belong in places like this, that every marble floor would remember her muddy feet. The mansion sprawled across land that could hold her entire village, glass walls revealing an infinity pool that bled into Lagos lagoon views. Adanna stood in the foyer, her reflection multiplied in mirrors she was terrified to touch, certain she'd break something worth more than her life. The staff assembled to meet the new Mrs. Okonkwo: chef, drivers, security, gardeners, the housekeeper Ada, whose cold eyes assessed Adanna like a stain on expensive fabric. Their silence spoke volumes. This village girl didn't belong here. Chiwetel led her through rooms that echoed with emptiness despite expensive furniture. The dining room could seat 20. The kitchen gleamed with appliances she couldn't name. Her entire village could live comfortably in just the ground floor. "Your bedroom is in the guest wing," Chiwetel said, leading her upstairs. "Far enough for privacy. You'll have everything you need." Far from his master suite, the distance felt intentional, a physical reminder of the contract's boundaries. He paused at her bedroom door. "If you need anything..." His voice dropped, exhaustion making him vulnerable. She noticed how his shirt clung to shoulders that carried empires, how his jaw clenched when their eyes met. "I won't bother you," she promised, though her body disagreed when he leaned closer to open her door. The brush of his cologne, sandalwood and something darker, made her breath catch. He noticed, stepped back. "Good night, Mrs. Okonkwo." The title felt like a lie and a promise at once. Dinner arrived on a silver tray: jollof rice, fried plantain, chicken. Enough food for 3 people. Adanna ate alone in the enormous dining room, each bite reminding her how displaced she was. Last week, she'd been grateful for N200 day labor. Tonight, she slept in silk sheets. If you suddenly woke up rich tomorrow, what's the first thing you'd struggle to adjust to? The space? The staff? The expectations? Comment below. At 2 a.m., unable to sleep in a bed too soft for someone used to concrete, Adanna wandered the mansion and found Chiwetel on the balcony, shirtless, staring at the water. When he turned, she saw something raw in his expression, grief or desire, or both. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head. For 30 minutes, they talked about everything except why being near each other suddenly felt dangerous. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo flew in from London with one mission: destroy the village girl who'd infiltrated her family before the marriage could be consummated or made real. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo swept into the mansion wearing George wrapper and gold that clinked with old money authority, her head tie towering like a crown. She circled Adanna the way a hawk examines prey, taking in calloused hands, village accent, everything that screamed, "Not one of us." "So this is the girl?" Her voice dripped contempt. "The one who trapped my son." Adanna stood straight, despite trembling. "Good afternoon, Ma." "Don't Ma me, child. I know exactly what you are. A street girl who saw opportunity and grabbed it. My son will come to his senses. and you'll be back where you belong. Family dinner became warfare. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo commanded the table, questioning every aspect of Adanna's life. Her education, primary school only, her family, poor farmers, her skills, housework, nothing impressive, her intentions, gold digging, obviously. My son did not survive Harvard and build an empire to marry a housemaid who can't even hold a fork properly. Adanna's hand tightened on the fork she'd been using wrong. Shame burned her face. Maybe your son wanted someone who sees him as human, not as an achievement. The table fell silent. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo's eyes blazed. Chiwetel's hand found Adanna's under the table. During the tense dinner, Chiwetel reached under the table and squeezed Adanna's trembling hand. The contact sent shock waves through her, his palm rough despite wealth, his thumb stroking her knuckles in silent apology. She glanced at him, catching hunger in his eyes that had nothing to do with the untouched food. His mother's sharp voice broke the moment. Chiwetel, remove your hand from that girl. Now. He didn't. Mama, with respect, this is my marriage, my choice, my life. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo stood, rage making her regal. Then you've chosen poorly. I'll stay until I fix this mistake. That girl leaves, or I disown you. Has anyone's family ever rejected you for not being good enough? Or have you been the family member who judged someone's partner? Be honest in the comments. This is a safe space. That night, Chiwetel appeared at Adanna's bedroom door, whiskey on his breath, defenses down. My mother is staying indefinitely, he said. He moved closer. But you're not leaving. The contract is 1 year, but... He stopped, jaw tight. I need you to stay. The words hung between them, loaded with meaning neither could acknowledge. When his fingers brushed her cheek, accident or intention, they both felt the contract's no intimacy clause crack. Wealth didn't just mean money. It meant cameras, social media, galas, where her every move would be judged by people who'd never slept hungry a day in their lives. The Oriental Hotel ballroom glittered with Lagos elite, oil money, political power, inherited wealth that never questioned its right to exist. Adanna descended the staircase in an emerald gown that cost more than her village's school budget, every eye tracking her like she was either prey or miracle. Chiwetel had spent 3 hours preparing her. How to walk, how to smile, which fork to use. Just breathe, he'd said. You're stronger than any of them. But strength felt different when 200 pairs of eyes dissected your every movement. The whispers started immediately. That's her, the homeless girl. Contract wife. How much did he pay? Chiwetel's hand settled on her lower back as they entered, possessive and steadying. Breathe, he whispered against her ear, his lips brushing skin that shivered despite the crowded heat. You look... He stopped, throat working. Stunning. You look stunning. The evening passed like a test she hadn't studied for. Conversations about investments she didn't understand. Laughter at jokes that weren't funny. Women in designer clothes measuring her worth by her accent. But then, something shifted. When asked about her background, Adanna stopped apologizing. Yes, I was homeless. Yes, I'm from a village. And yes, I'm learning. What's your excuse for not knowing compassion? The table fell silent. Then someone laughed, genuinely this time. On the dance floor, Chiwetel pulled her close, closer than the contract allowed, his body hard against hers as they moved. This isn't fake anymore, he admitted, voice rough. "Tell me you feel it too." Her silence was answer enough. Have you ever had to fake confidence in a room where you felt you didn't belong? Drop A if you've been there. As they left the gala, photographers swarmed. One shouted, "Mrs. Okonkwo, is it true you were homeless when your husband found you?" Before Chiwetel could respond, Adanna answered, "Yes, and if I could survive Lagos streets, I can survive anything you people throw at me." The clip went viral by midnight, and Zainab, watching from her apartment, began planning her revenge. They say the internet never forgets, and when Zainab leaked Adanna's story with the headline, "Beggar to Billionaire's Bed, Prostitute or Destiny," Lagos chose sides fast and brutal. The phone screens multiplied her face across every Lagos gossip blog. Muddy, homeless, desperate Adanna next to glamorous Mrs. Okonkwo in split-screen comparison. Comments flooded in, "She drugged him," "Village juju," "Prostitute upgrade." 3 million views in 6 hours. Zainab had done her homework. Old photos of Adanna sleeping under the bridge appeared everywhere. Fake testimonies from village sources claiming she'd been a prostitute back home. Bloggers analyzing every outfit, every mistake, every moment of vulnerability. The hashtag #SunGoldDiggerAlert trended for 3 days straight. Adanna stopped reading after the first 100 comments, but the damage carved itself into her confidence anyway. Every time she left the mansion, people stared differently now. Not with curiosity, with judgment. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo saw the blogs and said nothing, but her satisfied smile spoke volumes. The staff whispered. Even Ada, the housekeeper, started treating her with open contempt. She found him in his study, whiskey glass shattered against the wall, fury making him dangerous. "I'll destroy her," he snarled. Adanna approached slowly, placed her hands on his chest, felt his heart hammering. "Look at me," she commanded. And when he did, something shifted. He grabbed her waist, pulled her between his thighs as he sat on the desk. "You deserve better than this circus," he growled. "Than me." She cupped his face. "Maybe I want the circus." The kiss exploded between them. Violation of contract, violation of sense. His mouth claiming hers like he was starving, her hands fisting in his shirt. They broke apart, gasping. "We can't," he whispered. "The contract." "Damn the contract," she breathed, but he was already stepping away. "Let them talk. My character isn't determined by their opinions." "But I brought you into this. Your dignity is being shredded because of my revenge plot." "No, my dignity is intact because I know my truth. Can you say the same? Has social media ever turned against you? Or have you witnessed someone being cyberbullied? Comment below. Cyberbullying is real, and we need to talk about it. At 3 a.m., Adanna woke to nausea that sent her running to the bathroom. She dismissed it as stress until it happened 3 mornings straight. When she finally took a pregnancy test, the 2 pink lines made no sense. They'd never been intimate. The contract forbade it. So how? The test showed positive, but the math showed impossible. And in that gap between fact and reality, Adanna's entire world began to collapse. She stood in the marble bathroom, test clutched in shaking hands, her reflection multiplied in mirrors that showed every angle of a truth that made no sense. Pregnant. Impossible. Terrifying. The mansion's luxury pressed down like a trap closing. They'd never been intimate. The contract explicitly forbade it. The one almost kiss in the study didn't create babies. Then she remembered, 3 weeks ago, The mansion doctor had insisted on a routine checkup, blood work, medical examination. She'd thought nothing of it. Staff doctors examined everyone in wealthy households, right? But now, pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The doctor's insistence, how drowsy she'd felt afterward, the vague memory of waking up in the medical room with no memory of the examination itself. Had something happened to her while she was unconscious? The nausea returned, but this time it had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. For days, Adanna hid the truth, wore loose clothes, avoided Chiwetel. Every mirror became her enemy, showing the slight swell of her stomach that would soon betray her secret. Chiwetel found her crying in the garden that evening. "What's wrong?" He pulled her into his arms, the embrace they'd been avoiding since the almost kiss. She buried her face in his chest, breathing him in, wanting to confess everything but trapped by fear. His hands slid up her back, one tangling in her hair. "Tell me how to fix this," he murmured against her temple. She tilted her face up, lips inches from his. "Kiss me," she whispered. "Please, just—" He kissed her hard, desperate, both of them pretending the contract didn't exist, pretending this moment could stop time. When his hand slid to her stomach, she flinched. He pulled back. "Did I hurt you?" "No," she lied. "Never." If you discovered something impossible was happening to your body, who would you tell first? Comment below. That night, Chief Mrs. Okonkwo burst into the dining room with a pregnancy test she'd found in Adanna's bathroom trash. "You whore," she hissed. "You've been sleeping around, and now you're trying to trap my son with a bastard child." Chiwetel's face went white. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "We've never—" His eyes met Adanna's across the table. "Have we?" The accusation dropped like a bomb. If they'd never been intimate, whose baby was she carrying? And what did that make her in the eyes of everyone watching? The mansion became a battlefield, Chief Mrs. Okonkwo's rage echoing through halls, Chiwetel's cold silence worse than shouting, Adanna locked in her room scrolling through blog headlines. Fake wife, real pregnancy, the scandal that broke Lagos. "I don't know how this happened," Adanna repeated until her voice went hoarse. "But I swear, I haven't been with anyone." Chief Mrs. Okonkwo's voice dripped venom. "DNA test, now. And when it proves she's a lying whore, I want her arrested." Chiwetel said nothing, just stared at Adanna like she was a stranger. Like the connection they'd built, the late-night conversations, the almost kisses, the way his hand always found hers, meant nothing against mathematical impossibility. The media leaked the pregnancy within hours. Zainab's social media exploded with victory posts. The blogs went wild. 3-month contract wife already pregnant. The scandal wrote itself. For 3 days, Chiwetel avoided her completely. His mother called lawyers. The staff treated Adanna like a criminal awaiting sentencing. 3 days into the Cold War, Chiwetel entered her room without knocking. She stood by the window in thin nightclothes, sunset painting her skin gold, the small swell of her stomach just visible. His breath caught. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. But his eyes betrayed him, traveling her body with hunger that hadn't died despite accusations. "I don't know how this happened," she whispered, "but it's real. And I swear I haven't been with anyone." He crossed the room in 2 strides, hand hovering over her stomach. "May I?" She nodded, his palm spread across the small bump, warm and possessive. "If you're lying—" "I'm not," she breathed. For one moment, His forehead touched hers, and she felt him trembling. Then his phone rang, his lawyer, and reality crashed back. Adanna, I want to believe you, but this doesn't make sense. Since when does love make sense? Since when does trust require proof? Would you believe someone you love if all evidence said they betrayed you? Or would you demand proof? This one's hard. Comment honestly. That midnight, as Adanna packed her single bag, the same one she'd arrived with, Chiwetel's sister Amara burst through the door. "Don't leave," she gasped. "I need to check something." "That doctor who gave you the checkup, do you remember his name?" Adanna nodded. Amara's face went pale. "Oh, God, I think I know what happened to you." 24 hours ago, she slept in a mansion. Now she was back under Lekki Bridge, 7 months pregnant, the circle complete. Except this time, she had something to lose. Amara's theory hadn't mattered. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo demanded immediate removal. Chiwetel, trapped between mother and impossible truth, chose blood over contract wife. "Get out," he'd said, voice dead. "Take your things and leave." The bridge welcomed her back like a cruel joke. Same concrete, same traffic roar, but now her stomach swelled with life that kicked against her ribs as if protesting this downward return. Lagos hadn't changed. She had. And that made homelessness infinitely worse. People recognized her now. The blogs had made her face famous. Street hawkers pointed. Some laughed. Others spat. "Nah, the fake wife. Husband catch am with bell, way no be him own." She found shelter where she could. Church parking lots, under shop awnings. Occasionally, a kind woman would let her sleep on a mat. The homeless community, ironically, showed more compassion than the mansion ever had. Charity meals became her sustenance. Her body ached constantly. Pregnancy without proper care, sleeping on hard surfaces, walking miles searching for safe spaces. One evening, another pregnant woman approached her, heavily pregnant, maybe 9 months, homeless like her. They shared the last of Adanna's ground nuts, sitting on cardboard under a bridge exit. "I see you for blog," the woman said in broken English. "But me, I know say sometimes life just wicked." "No be your fault." The kindness broke something in Adanna. She cried for the first time since leaving the mansion. She dreamed of him every night, his hands on her stomach, his breath against her neck, the way he'd looked at her before trust died. Waking meant remembering she'd lost him, lost everything, but her body still ached for his touch, with a persistence that felt like betrayal. At 8 months pregnant and sleeping on cardboard, she still wanted the man who'd thrown her away. If you were 7 months pregnant and homeless, what would keep you going? Comment with what gives you strength in impossible situations. On her 9th night back on the streets, labor pains started. Too early. Too strong. As Adanna clutched her stomach and screamed into Lagos night, nobody stopped. Nobody cared. Nobody except the one person watching from a car parked 50 meters away. Amara, who'd been following her all week, and who now raced to make a call that would change everything. "Chiwetel, I have proof, and if you don't get here now, you'll lose them both." Some truths arrive too late, and some arrive in hospital corridors where life and death negotiate in fluorescent light and doctors' grave expressions. The emergency room swallowed Adanna in chaos. Monitors beeping, voices shouting medical terms she couldn't process, contractions ripping through her body like punishment for crimes she didn't commit. Through pain-blurred vision, She saw Amara holding her hand, phone pressed to her ear, saying words that sounded like proof and scandal and "you need to come now." Amara had been following her for days, documenting everything, investigating the doctor whose name had triggered her medical instincts. The pieces had clicked together too late, but maybe not too late to save what mattered. While nurses worked on Adanna, Amara's phone showed evidence that would shatter Lagos. Stolen medical records from the fertility clinic, bank transfers from Zainab's account totaling N5 million, security footage of the unconscious procedure. In the brief calm between contractions, drugged and exhausted, Adanna hallucinated Chiwetel beside her bed, his hand in hers, his voice promising everything would be okay. When consciousness returned, she realized the hand was real, the voice was real, and he was crying. Actually crying, as he stared at her swollen belly like seeing it for the first time. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry." Amara thrust her phone at him. The doctor's confession video played. "Mrs. Zainab paid me N5 million. She brought his frozen sperm from the clinic, said it was for her own treatment. I performed the IVF on the girl while she was sedated for routine blood work. I thought it was legal." Chiwetel's face went from confusion to horror to rage in seconds. "The baby is mine," he whispered to Adanna, voice breaking. "You're mine. I threw away everything that mattered." Have you ever gotten the truth too late to prevent damage? Share below if you've experienced that painful timing. Her water broke before she could answer, the hospital erupting into emergency movement, nurses shouting about fetal distress, and Chiwetel being physically removed from the room as Adanna screamed his name. While Adanna fought for 2 lives in an operating room, Amara unleashed evidence that would destroy reputations and expose conspiracies. Truth always has a price. The police station interrogation room flickered with harsh light as the doctor broke down, confessions spilling like poison from a wound, dates, payments, procedures performed on an unconscious girl who trusted medical authority. Mrs. Zainab said it was a prank between friends. "I swear I didn't know." "You implanted an embryo in an unconscious woman. That's not a prank. That's assault," Amara said coldly. The money trail led straight to Zainab's accounts. The business partner, Tunde, had helped steal Chiwetel's sperm samples months ago, planning this revenge even before the contract marriage existed. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo arrived at the police station, her face ashen. "What have I done?" she whispered. "That poor girl. What have I done?" In the hospital waiting room, Chiwetel watched Adanna's confession video from months ago, the one she'd recorded on her phone, just in case something happens to me. On screen, 7 months pregnant, Adanna spoke directly to camera. "I don't know if you'll ever see this, but I need you to know. I fell in love with you. Real love, not contract love. The baby, I didn't understand until Amara explained. But this child is ours, and I want you to know. I forgive you for not believing me. Love means trusting even when it hurts." Chiwetel's hands shook so badly he dropped the phone. How long would you go to get revenge on an ex? Comment below. But remember, karma is always watching. A nurse burst into the waiting room, face grave. "Mr. Okonkwo, you need to come now. The baby is in distress, and she's asking for you." "But sir," the nurse's voice cracked, "you need to prepare yourself. We might not be able to save them both." The doctor's question was simple. Save the mother or save the baby? Chiwetel's answer would define what kind of man he really was. Thunder cracked over Lagos as the operating room lights blazed, medical team moving with choreographed urgency, while Chiwetel pressed against the observation window like a man watching his heart stop beating in someone else's chest. The doctor laid it out clinically. Complications from premature labor, fetal distress, Adanna's body weakened by weeks of homelessness and malnutrition. They could prioritize the baby's survival or the mother's, not both. Save her, Chiwetel said without hesitation. Save Adanna. Inside the operating room, Adanna was saying the opposite. Save my baby. Please. He didn't choose this. The medical team looked between them, trapped in an impossible decision. They let him hold her hand through the window gap for 30 seconds before surgery. His fingers laced with hers, wedding ring pressing into her palm, the ring she'd never taken off, despite everything. Come back to me, he commanded, voice raw. Our story isn't finished. She smiled weakly. Promise me. If something happens, love our son enough for both of us. He kissed her knuckles. I'll love you both, forever. And when you wake up, I'm going to show you exactly how much. The heat in his eyes made promises her body responded to even in crisis. That's contract violation, she whispered. I'm burning that damn contract, he said. You're my wife, really mine. If you had to make this impossible choice, what would you do? There's no right answer, just truth. Comment below. The surgery took 4 hours. When the doctor finally emerged, removing bloodied gloves, Chiwetel couldn't read his expression. Mr. Okonkwo, the doctor began, and the waiting room held its breath. Your son is healthy, perfect, but your wife, the pause lasted an eternity, is asking for you. She wants you there when she holds him for the first time. Chiwetel's legs nearly gave out. They both lived. Both survived. Thank God. Both survived. The baby entered the world during a storm that turned Lagos streets into rivers. Fitting, since this child was born from rain-soaked beginnings and conspiracy that nearly drowned them all. The baby's cry pierced the thunder. Healthy, strong, demanding attention from a world that had tried to erase him before he existed. Adanna sobbed as nurses placed him on her chest, tiny fists waving at life he'd fought so hard to reach. Chiwetel entered the recovery room, stopped at the sight. His wife, his son, his family. Come meet him, Adanna whispered, exhausted but glowing. He approached like a man walking on sacred ground, touching the baby's tiny hand with trembling fingers. He has your eyes. He has your stubbornness, she laughed weakly. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo arrived hours later, no longer the proud matriarch, but a grandmother broken by guilt. She held her grandson with tears streaming, whispering Igbo prayers for forgiveness. Nwam, she said to Adanna, my daughter, I nearly destroyed you. Can you forgive a foolish old woman? Adanna's hand covered hers. Family forgives. When they were finally alone, baby sleeping in the bassinet beside her bed, Chiwetel climbed carefully onto the hospital bed, cradling Adanna against his chest. I need to feel you breathing, he whispered. His hands roamed her face, her neck, her arms, mapping her like confirming she was real. She turned in his arms despite post-surgery pain, their mouths meeting in a kiss that tasted of tears and gratitude and hunger that had been denied too long. When you're healed, he murmured against her lips, I'm going to show you what it means to be loved by a man who almost lost you. Her body responded despite exhaustion, heat pooling low. That's still technically contract violation, she teased weakly. I told you, he growled, hand possessive on her hip. That contract is dead. What would you name a baby born from this story? Comment below with your suggestions. I am reading all of them. As the family celebrated new life, Amara's phone buzzed with a message from the police. Zainab has fled the country. Warrant issued. But there's something else you need to know. She wasn't working alone. The business partner has information about another target. Chiwetel's face hardened. The victory wasn't complete. Zainab was still out there, and revenge never sleeps quietly. 1 year after a homeless girl offered a wrapper to a broken billionaire in the rain, they returned to Lekki Ikoyi Bridge, not as strangers, but as family. The bridge that had sheltered her lowest moments now stood decorated with lights and hope. Homeless youth gathered for the foundation launch that would bear her name, the Adanna Initiative. She stood on a makeshift stage where she'd once slept, holding her son, microphone in hand, Lagos stretched out behind her in all its chaotic glory. My story isn't special, Adanna said to the crowd. Every day, girls like I was arrive in Lagos with dreams and empty pockets. The difference is Ayanmo, and the character we keep even when life strips everything else away. Chiwetel stood beside her, hand on her waist. This woman taught me that wealth isn't measured in naira, but in how we treat people when nobody's watching. The foundation offered shelter, medical care, job training, everything Adanna had needed when Lagos tried to break her. The baby's traditional naming ceremony happened that afternoon. Family and community gathered. Chief Mrs. Okonkwo blessed her grandson with ancestral prayers, no longer ashamed of the daughter-in-law who'd survived more than she could comprehend. Before sunset, Chiwetel pulled out the original contract, that clinical document that had started everything. He lit it on fire, let it burn to ash. I have a different question now, he said, kneeling before Adanna. Not a business deal, not a transaction. Will you marry me? Really marry me? Build a life with me? She laughed through tears. We're already married. Then marry me again. Choose me this time. Not because you need to survive, but because you want to. Yes, she breathed. 1,000 times yes. That night, in their bedroom overlooking the lagoon, Chiwetel finally claimed his wife, the way they'd both been craving. Are you sure you're healed enough? He asked, reverent hands tracing her post-pregnancy body. I'm sure I need you, she breathed, pulling him down. The intimacy was slow, worshipful, both crying as bodies finally joined souls already merged. You're mine, he growled against her throat. Always was, she gasped, from the moment you saw me in the rain. Afterward, tangled in sheets worth more than her old life, she traced his face in moonlight. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For being broken enough that night to let me help you. He kissed her slowly. Thank you for being strong enough to survive until I found you. So tell me, what would you have done in Adanna's position? Run away? Fight back? Forgive? Comment below, because your story matters just as much as hers. And if this touched you, hit that like button, subscribe for next week's story, and share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Under the bridge where their story began, holding their son while Lagos traffic roared above, Adanna kissed her husband and whispered the truth she'd learned the hard way. Destiny doesn't rescue you. It reveals who you were strong enough to become all along.